Welcome to the eCommerce Growth Show, brought to you by Segmentify, the fast, lean learning machine, the fastest learning, most revenue-generating personalization platform for e-commerce.
Hi guys, welcome to the eCommerce Growth Show, and I'm really excited to introduce you a guy called Josh Duggan. Josh has 8 years experience in paid media and is one of the co-founders of a digital marketing agency called Vervaunt, established in 2017. Vervaunt is a 10-man team based in London, focused on as a paid media agency, covering all paid channels, and is also an e-commerce consultancy with a focus on replatforming and e-commerce technology. Hey, Josh.
Hi, Phill. Thank you very much for having me.
Not at all. It's great to have you here. Just to start things off, how did you end up in PPC?
Yeah, so interesting question. So I began working in PPC about 8 years ago. I joined a company called Essence, who at the time had a really good kind of technology offering. They had a lot of developers. They had loads of kind of sophistication around proprietary technology and tools. And their biggest selling point for me was they worked with Google. And part of the job was kind of like working on the Google account, which uni was kind of like a great opportunity. And I basically spent a year in a graduate scheme, like rotating between different departments. And the biggest department was media buying. And essentially you would kind of like negotiate different rates with publishers, get taken out to loads of kind of like lunches, got taken to Paris.
Nice.
Some of the more senior people got taken on like ski holidays and stuff. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And out of 14 grads, 12 obviously chose the media buying role. And me, myself, and one other chose the PPC biddable position. And the reason basically was just that one, there was a lot of talk that kind of like programmatic was becoming a bigger and bigger deal. And I knew that the PPC kind of biddable skills would have been pretty beneficial as the industry moves that way. And also there's just like there's limitless opportunity with biddable in terms of how you optimize. Like you'll immediately see a return on investment. If you make any changes, you immediately kind of reap the rewards. And there was just a lot more you could do as opposed to kind of media buying roles where you was a bit more restricted in terms of how much you could change. And it's like a really
What
exciting...
does, just out of interest, what does I was just going to say, what does programmatic mean?
So programmatic is essentially the like the science of buying media automatically. So it's actually been around, since like probably over the last 10 years or so. So the GDN was like an early example of programmatic buying, but what it means now is normally using like a DSP for your ad buys. And essentially it allows you to pull in like third-party data, and it's just a bit more sophisticated. But
fair enough. Interesting.
Quick summary would be, rather than calling up Channel 4 and negotiating a rate, you would buy the inventory online in an auction. So you remove all of kind of the costs around staff, and it's a lot fairer where you bid in an auction model.
All right. Interesting. Thanks, man.
And I think that's kind of how I started in PPC, and then I began freelancing about 5 years ago or so, and then just kind of as that grew, we saw kind of a nice niche where there was a lot of mid-sized retailers who didn't really have a good, good day-to-day managers on their account. So we try to focus on building an agency with like senior day-to-day people who service those mid-sized retailers.
Right. That's very interesting. So as a kind of an opening topic question, if you like, what would you say are the kind of most important things to know and to be doing with regards to Google Shopping?
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll start off with this, I guess, with like the basic principles, and then go in kind of some of the more advanced techniques. And if I say anything kind of like confusing or which doesn't make sense,
sure.
The main thing to know initially, so Google Shopping works very differently to text ads. So you don't target keywords and you don't bid at a keyword level. So this can cause kind of a lot of issues and concerns for retailers. So what happens is Google scrape your product feed, and then they will serve the products which they think are relevant to a user's search query. But as a result, you can end up appearing on kind of a wide range of terms which don't convert too well. And the biggest issue is that you don't bid for a term someone's searching. So if someone, I guess the easiest example would be, say, for example, Adidas. Someone searching for Adidas Ultra Boost trainers is a lot more likely to buy than someone searching for trainers.
Yeah.
And in the historical landscape, so with keywords, you would obviously increase your bid for the Adidas Ultra Boost term and reduce your bid for trainers. But with the shopping structure, you're kind of unable to do that. So the way the industry's moved is to kind of try and kind of use sophisticated logic and kind of like scripts to basically filter certain search terms into certain campaigns. And then that will allow you to adjust your bid based on certain terms and kind of adjust what products are serving.
Why can't you do that though, like in the shopping side of it?
That's a very interesting question. And basically over the last kind of like 5 years, Google have moved away from that keyword level targeting. And they're introducing a huge amount of like audience-led data. So I think they're slowly trying to compete a bit more kind of in the display space, and with against kind of like Facebook, where that takes a big part of media spend. They're trying to kind of like offer a service which is a lot more automated. So there's the introduction of smart shopping and a lot more sophistication around kind of people's income, their age, their gender, where they're based. So yeah, they're just slowly reducing the control for advertisers and trying to push it more towards automation.
Wow.
So yeah, it's quite an interesting place to be in. But and then just to give like a bit of context around how you might kind of optimize these shopping campaigns. So I'll stick with the Adidas example. So the most basic example is you would have 2 versions of each shopping campaign. So you would have a branded shopping campaign and a non-brand. And then in your non-brand campaign, you add Adidas as a phrase match negative to that campaign. So the generic campaign can't appear on any term what contains Adidas. And then you would also add in all of the product terms as well. So say Stan Smiths, Ultra Boosts, Predators, anything else which is Adidas related. And then in your branded campaign, you would roll out a number of kind of scripts or automation which basically would add in every search term which doesn't include Adidas or the product name as a negative. And then over time, you've got 2 campaigns, one campaign which only serves on Adidas terms or product terms, and then another campaign which only appears on generics.
Okay.
And then hopefully you can start to see that in your Adidas campaign, you would probably increase your bids, where users know what they're searching for, they're more likely to convert. And then in your generic campaign, you would probably begin adjusting what products serve. So if someone searches for trainers, you'd probably want to serve something more generic, like the Stan Smith. You might want to focus more on return visitors. You might want to focus more on specific times in the day, specific devices. And it just gives you a lot more control over how you're optimizing your shopping. So rather than just having one campaign where you've got the same bid for every single query, this allows you to have 2 campaigns where you adjust for bids based on how likely someone is to convert.
Wow.
Have I explained that okay?
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, it sounds, is this being something that's been going on for a long time then? Like this change?
Kind of. So I'd say it's been around in the industry kind of like for a good 2 to 3 years. But based on kind of how often we audit accounts and how much we look at retailers, it's only really been picked up in the last year or so. And I'd say in general, most retailers should be doing this. Like this is kind of more of a basic approach now. And I guess the more advanced strategies would be around, so say you're a luxury retailer, it might be, if you've got a limited budget, it might be that your script essentially says, we're going to add in every search term what triggers our adverts as a negative, unless it contains certain terms. So if you're a luxury brand, you might just want to appear on cashmere, luxury, fine knit, organic cotton, kind of like all of these terms. and then you're automatically adding in everything else as a negative. And the reason I mentioned negative so much is, so we audited account a couple of months ago, and the top spending search term, so the search what was spending the most amount in the account was Ferrari, and it was triggering a toy car Ferrari. So if you imagine, most people searching Ferrari are just going to be looking, for images of the actual car. And I'd say, Google's pretty generous with what terms it shows your ads to. So you just want to be kind of like super on top of, and just being able to control that as much as possible.
Absolutely. So when they were like doing the Ferrari one, was that for the actual car, or what were they actually trying to, get?
Yeah, so I guess unfortunately you don't know the intent behind it, but it was just simply for the term Ferrari, and based on a low conversion rate, realistically you'd add that as a negative. But there's like hundreds of other things. So that's kind of the most basic example, that brand and non-brand split. A lot of
is that all driven because of this change, that Google's doing?
Yeah, basically? Pretty much, to be honest. Before shopping was around, you would adjust your bids on the keyword, and you would know that the lower funnel, as they're called, and kind of the more specific terms convert better, and you would increase the bid. But Google kind of reduced that ability. But likewise, I guess another example, it depends what industry you're in, but we've done a lot of work with kind of watch retailers and sunglasses. And a lot of consumers, when they're ready to buy, they just search for model number. So if you imagine you go on kind of like to Ray-Ban's website, if I can remember the code, I think it's like RB5664 is like one of the product model numbers. A lot of people will search that in Google. When people are searching that, you want to have a high bid. So, you want to make sure you've got these strategies in place to make sure you're upweighting on those terms. But then when someone searches just sunglasses, you probably want to have a lower bid.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting place. And there's as I mentioned at the beginning, kind of like Google are moving a lot of the advertising capability away from the advertiser, and they're rolling out a lot of automation. They're trying to kind of like reduce the data that advertisers see as well. So in a relatively new shopping campaign type called Smart Shopping, they optimize everything for you, and you're not able to see that search term data. So where I mentioned that Ferrari example, with Smart Shopping, you can't see that. So it's an interesting kind of very dynamic industry. Lots changing. So
absolutely, it sounds really interesting, man. And you mentioned scripts and things like that.
Yeah.
Are they things that you build, like proprietary type script type stuff that you build?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got an in-house developer. We use a couple of kind of contract developers as well. But scripts are essentially an automated way to make decisions based on any data source. So I guess like one example is, here's a good example of Google Shopping actually. So say you sell men's, I always do this, Ultra Boost trainers in size 8. Say your size 8 goes out of stock, your size 11 would probably start serving in its place. But the issue is that when you search Ultra Boost in Google, you don't always see the size where the title gets truncated. So you don't really see what size it is. So what you often see is people click for size 11, they'll realize the most commonly purchased size 8 or 9 is out of stock, and then bounce. So we built a script which essentially says when the most common sizes are out of stock and the other sizes begin to serve too much and obviously don't convert too well, we'll get an email alert, and then we just know to go into that account and either reduce the bid, pause the SKU, and just check what's going on. So for a couple of clients, we even send those alerts to the client, and then they kind of they double check and say, so we work with one, they're like a luxury sports multi-brand retailer based in London, and they sell a lot of high-end women's yoga clothes. And if the small and mediums are out of stock, you really don't want the the extra large is serving. So we kind of custom built that tool for them.
Cool.
Yeah, that's kind of just an example of that
Yeah,
model,
yeah.
how it works.
No, that's really interesting. And like you said, it sounds like you work quite tightly with the brands that you serve on either doing that stuff for them or kind of with them, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of our like differentiators is where we do have an e-commerce consultancy offering, where
Hmm.
we try and be like really ingrained in their business. So all of our
Right.
team have got access to their e-commerce platforms. All of us can like make our way around Magento and Shopify,
Hmm.
slowly e-commerce as we're kind of getting more used to that. But like we've all got access
Yeah.
to clients' ESPs, and can kind of like push
Yeah.
that data through into Facebook and Google. So yeah, I guess just where we've got a bit more of a broader understanding of ecom, we try and
Yeah.
make use of that and just be really ingrained into what the business is doing. And even the like multi-channel piece, like how are the stores doing, what do
Yeah.
the stores sell, do we need to take that into account in online? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just like what data can we use basically.
Yeah, completely. I suppose it's interesting you mentioned about the sizes, and particularly where there's a brand at stake. Some with an XL getting served, XL clothing when they're a small or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not going to be very good for the brand. And it's interesting how that kind of overlaps into the world of general personalization. Where it would be the same sort of thing on site if you're wanting to optimize
Well,
experience for each customer.
yeah,
Exactly the sort of
definitely.
thing, innit?
So we actually, funny you mention that. So we actually do for all of our Shopify clients.
Yeah.
We've got an automated report which essentially is a stock download, but it not only shows the proportion of sales per size, also
Yeah.
returns rate. And
Okay.
quite often you'll see a certain size gets returned more than others, and
Yeah.
just some good data which they probably wouldn't look at themselves. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
stock and sizing is like really interesting. Loads of brands beyond
Yeah.
paid, just in ecom, loads of brands are doing cooler kind of like sizing guides to reduce those returns numbers. So I think that's a pretty
Yeah.
interesting space, which looks like it's
Yeah.
growing quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really interesting stuff. I mean, what would you, if you were to give some sort of quick tips, some teasers, for the listeners, what would you say today?
Yeah, lovely. That's actually one of my interview questions when I interview people. Is kind of like what are the five quickest things you would do when looking at an account. But
Yeah.
I guess so. So as we've mentioned, so you don't bid at for a keyword or a search term. So the most important thing you want to look at
Uh-huh.
is that search term data and
Mm-hmm.
look at where you're spending your budget. So in the example of the Ferrari account,
Mm-hmm.
that search term would want to be negative straight away. So
Yeah.
and you also kind of want to look at the proportion of spend that you're spending on non-converting search terms. So if
Sure.
you're spending a large proportion of your budget on terms that don't convert, you
Mm-hmm.
probably want to look at like rebuilding your account, looking at your product feed, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's another thing as well. So look at your product feed. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure that you've got the terms that you want to appear on need to be in your product data. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you're that luxury brand I mentioned, make sure you've got all of those organic and luxury and cashmere terms in your product description just to really help you serve against queries.
Mm-hmm.
And you also want to make sure your product title kind of reflects what people are searching for as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like industry best practice for product titles.
Right.
But just going back to the main advice, so yeah, the search term report would be priority one, and then
Mm-hmm.
priority two would be looking at your products which are spending the budget. So ideally, your shopping structure would break out individual products so that you bid at a product level. Because obviously, you want to, performance will differ between different categories and different products.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so ideally, all of your product groups will have individual products, so you can adjust the bids. But if not, you want to go into your dimensions report in
Mm-hmm.
AdWords, which is basically the same as your product performance report in Google Analytics, and
Mm-hmm.
it just shows you all of your aggregated SKU performance. So it'll show
Yeah.
you what's your top spending SKU and what's the
Mm-hmm.
return on it. And essentially, you want to filter by cost and make sure that your top spending SKU is not only driving a good return, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also a SKU that you want to be serving.
Yeah.
It's like it's good margin. You've
Yeah.
got a lot of stock, all of those things. And I guess conversely, you would also want to filter by revenue and then the SKUs what are driving the revenue and have got a good ROI, you want to make sure that you are bidding enough for those. So if you've got a good ROI and a lot of revenue but a low CPC, that essentially tells you that you should be, spending more. You would look at your impression share to tell you, how often you're serving against queries. But if you've got a low impression share and a good return on investment, that's a big flag that you're not spending enough on that product.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's hundreds of, I guess, just like to name some off. So yeah, the product feed's a big one as well. I guess just quickly to mention actually what might be interesting for your listeners is so Google recently announced, so when you search in Google Shopping and you click in the shopping tab, that's now going to be free organic listings. So Google are slowly trying, it's just like it's a one-step move to trying to compete with Amazon in terms of having kind of low barriers to entry for retailers. Obviously, they've got Google Actions in the US where you check out in Google. So they're slowly trying to compete with Amazon more. And a big thing for the UK, so it's already live in the US. When it comes to the UK, you want to make sure that you've essentially got an opportunity to drive free traffic, which was previously paid for. So optimizing your product feed, making sure you've got all of those, the title reflects best practice, your description's well built out, making sure that work's all done could be pretty valuable for your business. So product feed's definitely kind of a good thing to be looking at as Google are making that shift in the UK.
Absolutely, that sounds really interesting. I know you mentioned it sort of earlier, but what is the general overarching? I mean, obviously, from your world what Google's kind of trying to ultimately do. Is it basically, like you say, to take on Amazon, take on Facebook? Is that basically what they're doing? Then you have to like adapt to that as an agency serving your customers. You know what I mean?
I guess so. To be honest, I think it's easier to see with Facebook what their worries are. So kind of their concerns are, the percentage of spend that goes to Facebook on a media plan. So Facebook have invested loads in like new ad formats, Facebook 360. You've got TikTok coming in as a big player. You've got Snapchat. So Facebook's whole kind of strategy for the last 2 years has been geared around improving the measurement. So they've got loads of like incrementality testing, which they've rolled out. They've released Facebook Analytics, which essentially is the same as GA, but a lot more accurate audience data. So it's quite easy to see what Facebook are doing. They're just basically improving the service for advertisers and trying to make it more interesting for consumers. So just like, offering new ad formats. Google is much harder to kind of define. So I can't really understand the move behind reducing advertisers' capability. So for example, actually, there's a lot of backlash recently where Google so there's a optimization score in Google, and basically agencies are given kind of a partner badge if all campaigns and accounts hit a certain level of that optimization score. And they've basically enforced that optimization score needs to include a lot of their automation. And that got a lot of backlash where Google don't have access to your store data. So they're not able to optimize if products in store are doing well. They don't understand, not yet anyway, the capability of if you're going to be going into sale, what products to be upweighting. Things like that. They don't, and you can break it out yourself, but they don't have the profit margin data, and things like that. So I can't fully understand why they're pushing the automation route. I think in general, like machine learnings makes sense. Like a lot of our clients use automated bidding and things like that. But my only worry is when they take full control is, some of that stock and profit margin stuff's not yet a consideration. But so it's a very interesting place to be in. As I said, I think Facebook's quite easy to see that they basically want consumers to keep engaging with ads, and that's why we've got so many new ad formats. And Google, I guess their bigger threat is Amazon, and Google Actions is probably the biggest case of that. Where it's the one checkout on Google in the US.
Yeah, are they going to do that then over here?
I guess so. Yeah, like it's gone quite. I haven't heard much news on it recently, to be honest. But obviously, Facebook and Instagram are releasing their native checkouts, so it only really
Right.
makes sense
Right.
for Google to be doing it. Yeah, but I think their
Yeah.
reporting's nowhere near as good as AdWords, so it's still a bit behind where it needs to be.
Right. Very interesting. Well, I mean, I must admit, a lot of that for me was completely brand new. Sounds like you've really got to be on the crest of the wave, like with what's going on out there, particularly with Google and what you were talking about in this chat so far. I mean, tell us just maybe how guys can get in touch with you if they're interested in finding out more about this.
Yeah, great. So our Vervaunt, our website is vervaunt.com. So it's spelled VERVAUNT.com. And as you mentioned, we're quite a small team. There's 10 of us. We're based in Moorgate. My email is just josh@vervaunt.com. And I guess that's probably the easiest route.
Fantastic. And just to sort of finish off from my perspective to you, I know you've mentioned some brilliant stuff, which in itself sounds very differentiating from my point of view. But obviously, the kind of world of digital marketing and all this stuff that you've been talking about, as it is for anybody, it's a reasonably kind of crowded market. There's a lot of people trying to, get business. Let's be honest about that. Same for myself as well, right? So, I mean, on that basis, I mean, how do you take everything that you've said and sort of batten it down into maybe a couple of sentences that would say, why all the work you've done to build Vervaunt, from the ground up, would be something that people should really get in touch with you about? Well, what do you think those things are?
Yeah. So I guess based on the context of this podcast initially, so we're all specialists in Google Shopping across the team. So we've got a good number of proprietary scripts. We're very sophisticated in terms of product feeds.
It sounds like it.
We manage all of our client product feeds. We've all got kind of, as I mentioned, access to e-commerce platforms. We understand product data and things like that. So all of the team, so 6 of the 7 people in paid have got over 3 years experience. So anyone you work with kind of is a more senior day-to-day that you might see elsewhere. And we just try and be kind of really ingrained in the business. So we'll often have clients come and work from our office for a day. We always kind of encourage the team to kind of go out to client offices, meet all of the team. We do a lot of workshops and internal training. We'll always allow clients to meet the account manager that they'll work with. So like one of the biggest frustrations we hear is where account managers change or they meet the head of sales and then that's not who they work with. So my main things like this person audited your account, here's their approach and here's who you'd work with. And I think that's quite a nice way to do it. And just in general, I know I've spoke a lot about shopping, but we're pretty technical and advanced across other channels as well. So we've got a Facebook app, which essentially is the same as a script in Google. So it would allow us to do any kind of dynamic changes. So say the frequency gets too high and users keep saying the same advert, it could dynamically rotate in the next image. It could also take into account kind of like any third-party data. So say your website goes offline, it could pause all of the adverts. Hopefully websites aren't going offline these days, but just any kind of sophisticated, automated decision, we can have that kind of built into this app. So,
but it sounds like you're saying around, being very closely aligned with the companies that you work with is critical. And I mean, it's something that we're very passionate about as well. We found that actually, as a differentiator, I completely agree with you because, being able to offer a managed service effectively to our clients as a sort of an ongoing optimization service for personalization or all the great stuff you were talking about in terms of the Google Shopping side or Facebook, whatever campaigns they're doing. It's just that extra level of return, really, I find, because there is almost like an extension of their own team working hard for them and very personal, and we're exactly the same like that. And actually, I completely agree with you. I find it is absolutely critical now more than ever to be able to provide that kind of service to differentiate from, the rest of it, if you like. So, it's really important. Fantastic. Well, Josh, thank you so much for that. It was really interesting.
Thank you very much. us. Well, me.
Not at all. Not at all. And yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I think there was so much in that for myself alone, let alone the guys listening, that I think it would be really wise to actually, get you back on here at some point and perhaps go a little bit deeper into one particular area, or just even get an update on the whole Google shopping side of things and see how things are going. If you haven't done so already and you'd like to keep abreast of all the latest podcasts that will be here on an ongoing basis when they're released, and also catch up on any of the previous ones that you might have missed, please register your details at segmentify.com/podcast, and we'll be in touch as soon as they become available from the website and all the other usual channels. This has been Phill at Segmentify, and you can catch me at phill@segmentify.com if you have any questions, or of course, if you'd like to be part of the show. We're always really keen to uncover more of you great thought leaders out there.
Put us to the test and let us prove we can drive more revenue for you. Sign up for a completely free proof of concept or split test against your current provider, set up and optimized by our team within a few days at segmentify.com/demo.